Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I am happy to welcome you to the second day of the ESFRI EOSC workshop on what ESFRI or what EOSC brings to the users. And my name is Mirjam van Dalen. I'm chairing the task force in ESFRI on the European Open Science Cloud. And before we come to the first session that is chaired by Per Ooster, I would like to share some housekeeping rules with you. Please use the question and answer facility which you find in the lower part of your Zoom to ask questions. So do not raise your hands and do not write questions in the chat, because this is much easier for the chairs of the session and for us to answer in a good way to all your questions. So with this, I would like to hand over and start session 5 of day 2 of this workshop. And Per Ooster from CSCIT Center for Science is chairing this session. The session is called How Generic and Thematic EOSC Services Can Add Value to the Research Infrastructure Community. Per, the screen is yours, please.
Okay, thank you, Mirjam. I have one slide here to share, so if I could give. So I welcome you to this 5th session of the workshop, and we have here the speakers of this this session that is named How Generic and Thematic EOSC Services Can Add Value to the RI Community. And for those who were present yesterday, you know by now that it is an abundance of tools and services, and much of the discussion yesterday was around how to find the path and how to find the right tools and how to work with these things. And we will continue along that theme today here, and we'll have a few presentations where also examples from where communities have really used various services and tools to improve and be more improve their research and collaborate in a better way. And because I don't think there is any optimal way to use all these tools and opportunities that we have, but all the way from research groups, larger communities, up to research infrastructures, there are practices and ways to work and find a workflow that really is the best for what you are doing. And there are plenty of opportunities today already, and we will get more structure in this through EOSC, of course. That's the ambition. And so let's see now what these different communities are up to and what is happening. So we start off with Klaas Wieringa from Xi'an and the EOSC Future project, who will tell about the EOSC platform, current status and future plans for an ecosystem of EOSC for regional, thematic, personal levels. And so please, Klaas.
Thank you, Per. Can you stop sharing?
I do.
And
then you can start.
With a bit of luck, you now see my slide.
We do, yes.
Perfect. So good morning, everybody. I had not made up the title of my presentation myself, and since it was hard to fit all of it on the slide, I shortened it a little bit. I want to talk to you in 10 minutes or so about what we're doing in the EOSC Future project, and hopefully make you enthusiastic for connecting to the EOSC core that we're building currently. So you probably have seen this picture in one shape or form in previous events already. So I don't want to spend too much time on it. I realize that this is a pretty complex picture. What I think I would want to you to take away from this is that in many ways you can see this as a box of Lego pieces, and the idea is not that everybody that connects to EOSC will use each and every of those blocks, but that you can make use of whatever makes sense to you and your community. And we do that by defining what we have called an interoperability framework, or actually I should say interoperability frameworks. It is a way of making it possible to find and use resources and services from different clusters, and we do that by defining how the different standards can interoperate with each other. So the important part for research communities is in the blue bit. That is, first of all, what happens in your own community, and second, what services do other communities make available through EOSC that you can benefit from. And if I then move to one of these science communities, ENFRI, then you see that they have they started implementing a set of portals called the ENFRI Hub, and this is all happening inside the ESFRI cluster. But if you then look at how they plan to interact with the with EOSC at large, then you will see that they essentially fill one of these columns in the EOSC exchange layer of the big architecture picture. So again, complicated, complex set of services that form the EOSC core. What is important is the interface of a community with the architecture, and the same the ESCAPE cluster did. I will not go into details because time is not really permitting, but again, ESCAPE pictured all of the activities that happen inside the cluster, and they have mapped that in I would say a slightly more ambitious way to this EOSC architecture picture, and they have indicated where ESCAPE thinks they can add value to EOSC and what they can take out of it. And I think for me this is the core question, is what can your community bring to the table, but equally important, what can you take out of EOSC? How can you make sure that if my biggest fear in all honesty is that we spent 2.5 years building something that will not be used. So instead of us in splendid isolation creating something, we want to know what it is that makes it for you valuable to make use of EOSC, and we want to make sure that we address your needs. So in the Q&A, in the panel, I don't care whenever you think you can articulate what it is that you miss in what we're doing, or whether you want to check if we are addressing your problems, please reach out to me or anyone else in the EOSC Future project to find out more. Because in the end, thinking about this from a researcher perspective, the way I see the bright future of EOSC, and where I think if we get our act as a community together, we can build something really valuable. Then it goes something like this. We have existing communities, the ESFRI clusters, regional clusters, all kinds of other communities out there that exist, and they typically have, like Escape, like ENFRI, like many communities, they have their own community platform with their own tools, workflows, APIs, all these things that make sense inside a particular community. And our vision is that that will not change. You will keep using mostly the existing community platform. However, we want to put something to the side of that, and that is what we call the EOS Core platform. It also does have a portal. It also supports tools and workflows and APIs. So in theory, you could use that if you don't have your own existing community. But the important thing is that it has this, what we call the comprehensive resource catalog. And that is essentially a way of, in whatever cluster you are, you can find in that resource catalog resources and services from all other participants in EOSC. And in the end, that is what this is about. It's supposed to create this network effect. The more people participate in EOSC, the more value you get out of it. Because apart from this one community, there are, of course, more communities. And if they do the same, then this EOS Core platform will provide you access to more and more resources that ideally will benefit your research. Maybe not from day zero, maybe not for day one, but as you have heard in some of the examples in yesterday's sessions, the real big societal problems that we are dealing with, and COVID is obviously one of them, but by now hopefully not the most important anymore soon. But there are many more of those. All the big problems, I believe, can only be addressed in a multidisciplinary approach. And in order to have a multidisciplinary approach, you need to have access to resources from other communities. So the idea is by providing this core platform and by having research communities bring in content, or I should probably say references to content in this core platform, we can enable these cross-disciplinary use cases. And I said it before, but I want to emphasize it once again. This is not something that is meant to replace what is there, what works, where you know your way around. What will happen is that community platform to the left, that it will still look like the same, smells like the same, walk like the same. All of a sudden, it's not a duck anymore, though. It has become a swan, because in addition to what you already had in your existing platform, you will find also content and resources from other communities. And of course, there are also researchers that are not part of an organized community. Not only citizen research, that's of course the sort of gold standard for individuals doing research, but often it is a researcher that goes outside his existing topic of research and looks at other things. It can be communities that are being formed. If we get it really right, then I could imagine that far down the line, maybe in 10 years' time or so, we will have the normal way of interacting with EOSC will be through this central portal, but that is not at all a goal for the immediate future. So I hope with this I've given you a bit of an insight into the way we're thinking in in the EOSC Future project, and how we see this core platform that we develop in the bigger scheme of things. And as I said before, I'm now later, whenever available, to further discuss and further find out how we best can make sure that what we are doing answers to your needs. With that, I thank you for your attention, and back to you, Per.
Thank you very much, Klaus. That was very nice talk. And I just encourage everyone, in the bottom of your Zoom screen to the right, you have a Q&A button, and then there you could put questions. We will do so that we take the questions after all the presentations. We should have time then for all the questions. So, and the panelists will stay, so that is not a problem. Now we move to the next talk, and that is regional projects by Isabel Campos from the Spanish National Research Council. And are you ready, Isabel?
Yeah, let me share the slides. Share the screen, actually. Share screen. Okay, so.
That looks good. Thank you very much. Please.
So let me go on. So this, I am going to describe some of the developments that we think in our regional project in EOSC Synergy that might be relevant for ESFRI communities in particular, and what are the reasons that we believe that is particularly relevant for large research infrastructures in general. So this first slide is a bit of a reflection. What makes an ESFRI something different from the long tail of science, or from the work of small teams that we are used to have in most of the scientific communities? In our view, this is the community endeavor. Yeah? And this community somehow needs to lead the way to show to the others how to rely on best practices, right? Because typically ESFRIs are challenging problems. They are addressing problems that require really a broad cooperation to advance the state of the art. This, I would say, is the most definitory characteristic of a large research infrastructure. So that, as we all know, implies a number of challenges, both at the human level, in terms of handling the cooperation of broad networks of researchers, managerial structures. Obviously, the sociology of large teams is something very complex to deal with sometimes. ESFRIs also typically have a higher investment level than what we observe in the everyday work. There is sophisticated equipment, large IT infrastructures, etc. And there are well-defined goals. During the roadmap, the goals of an ESFRI are properly defined. So you really know what you are up to, right? So quality methodologies, I mean, all the institutions that participate, that are members of ESFRIs and countries, etc., are used to best practices in many areas. So we run the human resources in large organizations using best practices in career development, appraisal, conflict management, but even in service operation, yeah, where these best practices in management have expanded in the IT world with certifications, with validations like ETIL, etc. So now, what happens with the actual enabler of the infrastructures, which is the software? Yeah, we should actually come through with some sort of approach to guarantee that the services that are composed with the software that the developers come up with also follow certain standards, and that the experience of the user will be good. Yeah? And then let alone the whole FAIR movement, which in the end of the day, it's what it implies is best practices in data handling, right? That is, in our view, the core of the FAIR movement. Let me change this. So, so we have, say, these quality perspectives to provide a practical approach to software service deployment and data handling that will improve or at least generate, say, trust among end users and all the stakeholders in general, also software developers and infrastructure managers. No? Because in the end of the day, what people want is to have a reliable infrastructure that eventually can interoperate with our peers, that is performant, secure, yeah, and then obviously you want to get the correct results, right? So this is something what we call an integrated quality approach. Yeah. EOSC needs software, services that are composed with that software, and data, right? The data that is produced by those services in the first instance, right? And quality, we think that it must be transversal across these three components: software, services, and data. So we are working for the past year and a half so in the project to foster the adoption of EOSC through quality in software and services by the promotion of best practices and the assessment of quality, and in data by promoting again the adoption of FAIR principles in a pragmatic way. So what have we done in a nutshell? What we have done is providing a platform that is able to assess software, services, and data quality in EOSC. And we have validated it with production level thematic services in these four, let's say, large thematic areas: Earth observation, biomedicine, astrophysics, and environment. So this work has been inspired by the DevOps movement. So we have exploited continuous integration and continuous delivery, and it's based on open source tools and deployable as a service. So it's something that anyone can download and operate, right? This platform also enables the exploitation of quality criteria for FAIR principles, which I think is important. And we have also established, also in open source, the foundations to reward software developers' quality achievements in EOSC. So how does this work in practice? Imagine a generic case in Earth observation. So you want to monitor X, Y, Z, certain observable using Copernicus data. Yeah? What we have is, if you want, this is a very generic framework. You have software that you need to test, then you need to deliver the service, and then the data that is produced by that service, you want it to comply with FAIR data principles. That, I believe, is a fairly generic scenario. In the first step, one wants to be sure that the software at least complies with the standards and that there are no basic mistakes in the releases. So a certain level of quality assurance, also at the level of programming. This we have done, as I said, using DevOps and continuous development integration. So it is possible to have to connect software repositories in a way that the code style checking is taking place automatically. The service integration is also part of the pipeline of check-ins in the sense that we can check the API integration, perform functional tests, check performance and user support as well. And then in the end, there is a documentation check-in stage in which the system is able to check that at least the documentation is there and that it complies with certain level of quality. Yeah. So that is very nice. And we have it working, say, for a number of services already. This is an open effort, as I keep insisting. We have all these criteria for software and for services have been collected in an open development process. In the case of software, this is the work really that continues a long line of work that started with the project Indigo Data Cloud, where we started to work with this assurance baseline criteria for research software projects. And in EOS Synergy, we have extended as well to service quality assurance. So we have included the higher level functional tests, integration testing, etc. But as I said, there you have the GitHub pages, and this is open. You can interact with us via issues, and you can cooperate as you think is best. Yeah? Then obviously we need to deliver the service, and there we provide also the typical automation, right? By deploying on the cloud, whatever service based on containers with Kubernetes, etc., which is what we check with the quality platform. I will not enter into many details, but we are of course open to explain all this technology much more in detail, but we don't have the time in this presentation for that, obviously. And then I come to the assessment or FAIR criteria. Here, okay, there is a fair amount of theory regarding FAIR data and not so much practice. Yeah, it is difficult when we did the preliminary survey to find, for example, tools that provide automation in checking FAIR data that could be easily adopted by communities like ESFRIs, right? So what we have done is we have, of course, developed an evaluator, a FAIR evaluator that will be used institutionally at the CSIC level by Digital CSIC, which is, to our knowledge, the only evaluator that implements the RDA criteria. We have also integrated the quality assessment tools in there, in the FAIR evaluator, and also in Fuji. We will speak about that later. Yeah. And including, as I said, actionable features, so that the checking of FAIR data is something that comes automated to the end user, and then we think then you have a chance for adoption, yeah, because people will not be filling forms. So this is a bit of a summary of what I said. So we have implemented the RDA criteria in the FAIR validator. We are testing it with different types of repositories, with DSpace, CRIS, and with Dataverse, which are also gaining some fair amount of momentum within the community. And we have integrated all this in the full loop of service quality assurance as a service. This is easier that it sounds. This is a web interface that connects to the platform, which provides intuitive access to the users, right? So essentially, yeah, you can see there how it works. We provide programmatic access to researchers and developers to a sort of pipelines as a service system, which is able to check the software, the services, and the data quality. And at the end of the process, it issues a badge that you can see there at the right, that estimates the quality in terms of fulfillment of those quality criteria that we have defined before. Yeah, and this badge is defined in a way that this is the view of the panels, as the way to provide quality recognition as part of these quality assurance functionalities. We think this is extremely important, because it getting a tag that, okay, you are doing things properly, that you are fulfilling widely adopted best practices, is something that should be rewarded. Yeah, it's sort of rewarding the quality of the achievements. Yeah, it will incentivize, no question about it, the adherence to quality baselines and FAIR principles, and improve the software services and data visibility in the EOSC Marketplace or wherever it is. This we have done also in following the open badges specification, using the badge R implementation, which is the most popular one. And it is, as I say, integrated in the whole platform. But yeah, so this is how it looks in a nutshell. So this is our generic use case. Yeah, so you start with the software, the developers have the code, they go through quality assurance, then quality assurance is applied as well to service delivery. When you have data, then you can test the FAIR principles through the typical metadata repositories that we all know. Then you get a badge with a color, depending on how good the testing pass. And this is published in the EOSC Marketplace. So this is our idea of how things can work. Right? As a summary, and with this I conclude, our general approach to foster EOSC adoption is providing incentives to quality, to developers and service providers by establishing the foundations of what rewarding quality is, and by rewarding those quality achievements via badges and additional visibility in the marketplace. Also for the users, adopting EOS software, services, and data via a quality approach makes it much easier to produce mature and verified products and solutions, etc. And in the end of the day, this is what will make EOSC more visible and more appealing, because in the end, people want something that works. Otherwise, they try once and never return, right? So we think that a certain level of quality in whatever appears in the marketplace needs to be imposed from above, yeah? So that the experience of the end users is positive. And this is all. This is our brochure with the thematic services of the project integrated. You might want to have a look. This is, I believe, interested in general for application integrators also in ESFRI's research infrastructures in general. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Gracias,
Yeah.
Isabel. So thank you for this presentation. And I think we immediately switch over to Jonathan Feds from Elixir, and who will tell us about the Elixir authentication and authorization tool. Please, Jonathan.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for inviting me. Let me just do the usual double check that everyone can see the slides okay. Yep, okay, good. So I'm going to present a service that's developed in Elixir, which is a life sciences research infrastructure. I'll say a few words to introduce that in a moment. And I'm going to introduce the AAI service. So this is an authentication and authorization infrastructure. As Elixir has grown from the world of genomics in particular, you can understand there's a particular emphasis whenever you're dealing with sensitive human data on facilitating and enabling that seamless access through a service like an AAI service. And of course, it's a foundational part of what we're trying to do across EOSC as well. So I'm based at the Elixir Hub near Cambridge in the UK, co-located with the European Bioinformatics Institute. Elixir is a European member state organization, intergovernmental organization, I should say. There are currently 22 full members, and that includes one of the nodes is the European Bioinformatics Institute, and currently one observer state and others sort of considering in the queue or working towards membership. So we coordinate services for the life sciences across Europe, increasingly working with through strategic partnerships at the global level, of course, as well. And the typical services we coordinate are those demanded by that vibrant and very large bioinformatics community. So the first key resources, I think, that Elixir endorsed, made available, was able to underwrite were the sort of core data resources. So these are very large data sets. What you don't want is the old world I remember as a younger researcher in astrophysics, where you're, literally having to download everything to one place, run the software there, and so on. It just doesn't scale when you get to the larger data sets we use across many of our disciplines in science and research now. So we have recommended interoperability resources tools, repositories, software, and all the rest of it, compute facilities across our nodes where people can run large analysis, including HPC, against these very large core data sets, and obviously run their own data against that. And obviously we have increasingly played an important role in coordinating some of the larger grants, including for the signatories to the 1 million plus genomes treaty, large human data focused grants, but also large research data management coordination activities in the life sciences. Okay, so to illustrate the scale of the challenge, here's the kind of where Elixir started in terms of having the increased need to deal with seamless access to these very large data sets that are being generated, in this case, by high throughput sequencers. And of course, we've heard a lot about this in the last couple of years in the context of COVID. So these are the data are being generated worldwide. And here's a live map. There is a small link there. I'm sure the slides will be made available if people are curious to look themselves. It's a typical live data map of the use of this data globally and how people are accessing different data sets. I'm showing this because I think it nicely explains the high importance, critical importance of providing seamless access to resources. So although the majority of life science services, especially in bioinformatics, are openly accessible, I referred to those core data resources. Most of those are publicly accessible. There's a culture of making it so in bioinformatics. You still typically would need some kind of system username and password to access them. And then, of course, when it comes to sensitive data and licensed resources, they will require much stronger security. So each of these different services will typically implement local access management solutions, again, issuing their own usernames and passwords. Researchers clearly will quickly become overloaded. And indeed, if you're running the kind of analysis where you need to call on lots of distributed resources, data sets, software services, and containers, and so on, this becomes a huge block to actually doing that research. One of the skills we needed to develop as young researchers, I don't know, I guess it's almost 20 years ago now, is how to do that. You spend a lot of time working out how to stitch things together. That doesn't scale, as nearly all researchers need to do that. We don't need everyone to learn the stitching skills. We want to make it easier for them to be able to access things and concentrate on the scientific analysis. So the AAI solutions are a way of enabling researchers to use their typically home organization credentials, so a university, it could be an industrial partner, or they can use a public identity, such as ORCID, LinkedIn, and others. Of course, if they use a public identity, obviously they won't be able to pass home organization credentials that would allow access to more sensitive data sets or project resources if they're working within a particular EC project, for example. And then an AAI service will allow the service providers to control and manage the access rights of their users and create different access levels for research groups or international projects. So just very quickly, the sort of timeline, this service, Elixir pre-exists 2014, but and there was an implementation study I was hearing in 2013 to first develop the concepts for the Elixir AAI service. But it really began in earnest in about autumn 2014, requirements and design, initial deployment as part of the new Elixir compute platform back then through the EC Accelerate project. And then the service itself entered production in November 16. This service is not run by the Elixir hub where I'm based. It is operated by two of the nodes in the Czech Republic and Finland. And it does that sort of through subcontracts from the Elixir hub. So we are the ultimate owner. And then Life Science AAI is something I'll go on to talk about. in an EOS context, how we've been working for many years, working to common blueprints, using common underlying standards in this AAI work in order that we can federate services across multiple scientific domains. So the service itself, in order to operate it, requires typically these things. So the maintenance of all the services and servers needed, ensuring the information security, the policy level, availability and confidentiality, all these things need to be monitored, measured, and acted upon. And then, of course, research never stops. We're always integrating new features coming from other projects to Elixir AI. And I think that will continue, you know, people will continue to test and develop new services as they are required. For example, through something like Elixir AI, and that can then be where those services are useful across multiple domains. EOSC is the right place to sort of gather those future requirements and test and develop them through other partners, and then implement, make them available as once they're ready, production ready. And then finally, registering and supporting the new relying services from externally funded projects, for example. So I won't dwell on this, but those who are keen can look at sort of live statistics for the service. And of course, as any good service, you develop operational key performance indicators around the number of active Elixir IDs and so on and so forth. You can see we have a big spread. Here's a sort of, in a nutshell, by the end of 2021, just under 7,000 registered users, 8,500 logins per month, but importantly, 131 different relying services integrated, so using Elixir AI to enable access. We're also testing just as many services at any one time. First and second line help desk services now implemented during 2020-21. And these users are based of order 1,000 different home organizations now. But clearly, Elixir itself covers a wide range of life sciences, an increasingly wide range. But as we all know, you know, there are many existing research infrastructures that cover specific domains within that context. So biomedical infrastructures, BBMRI, for example, and Yaris. And Eurobioimaging is another nice example of, you know, multiple different research infrastructures serving life sciences. So as part of the EOS Life project, which Elixir coordinates with, I think it's 13 life science research infrastructure partners. One of the first deliverable actually was a blueprint on access and user management for life science. And of course, that ties closely to the work done at the EOS, across EOS level, and the blueprints developed through the ARC and Corbel projects. And our vision is that we want that same vision that we've been building over many years in Elixir AI. We want to be able to enable that seamless access across the different infrastructures and their services. This work has been developed in the life sciences through EOS Life. Elixir has been a major contributor. The whole idea is to operate with the e-infrastructures. And we are actively going through a process now, along with a couple of major RI partners, to migrate from our Elixir AI service, so migrate our users to the life science AI. And that will begin to happen next month. Lots of work being done, on the sustainability models. And I think that's a theme we might return to in the panel. How do we sustain these services? We can't just do it through one shot of funding, in this case through EOS Life. Again, I'm getting to the end. I won't dwell on this slide, but I want to get across the complexity that's needed in order to come up with the right policies. We've had a policy working group within EOS Life on this just for life science AI, which has taken, you know, between 1 and 2 years to develop a range of policies, whether it's for users, identity providers, e-infrastructures, virtual orgs, and common policies. So there's a whole level of work that's gone on that I think nicely drives what's required across EOSC more widely. So to conclude, I just want to put this in the bigger picture still of federating across the EOSC AI. We've obviously, since those early projects through Corbel and the ARC project, been working with other infrastructures across the scientific domains in order to enable this vision of community AIs, working with infrastructure proxies so that you can connect all of them. What we don't want is that every new service provider has to invent their own new set of conformance tests and all the rest of it. The great beauty of working at the cross EOS level and cross ESFRI level is that we are able to show the best practice, provide training, provide assistance, not just to end users, but also to the infrastructure providers to enable them to simply implement according to common standards and common proxies and so on. And in the larger vision still, we're working with that EOSC AI Federation with using these international identity management standards, in this case, EduGain, and that enables you to potentially connect to wider services still again. So I'll leave these links here. I'm sure slides will be shared, but hopefully that's given you a vision. I think the one thing I haven't mentioned explicitly, but I'm sure we'll come to again, is that I think the big challenge for us over the next few years is how to sustain those services driven through one-shot funding, in this case through EOS Life in the Elixir and life sciences world, how to sustain them in this EOS context. And then also considering, in our case, we will need to work with a different set of identity standards from the healthcare world. So increasingly more and more data used in research in the life sciences is generated in healthcare, and that brings its own whole world of challenges, but also exciting opportunities. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. And I think you had a very clear message here for the EOSC Association and maybe for the ESFRI also on the sustainability. So we have 2 more presentations to go, and we move immediately. We are a bit short of time, but we move immediately to a thematic marketplace, the Social Science and Humanities Open Marketplace by Francisca de Jong. Please. Oh, it's already there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to catch up for the lost time, or not lost time. It is
yeah, it was
very well used time, but we don't have enough. Like we don't have enough certainty about the sustainability of all the beautiful initiatives that are being discussed here. But let's see how we can inform the stakeholders of the EOSC and the policymakers in ESFRI that we need some coordinated action here. So thanks for inviting me. Thanks for allowing me to represent the cluster project SHOCK, which is the initiative for, or the cluster initiative for the social sciences and humanities. And I will talk about one of the vehicles that we have developed as part of our project for sustained collaboration, also for sustained visibility in the wider EOS context. And we're very proud to be able to present this here just after the formal launch of the release of the first SSH Open Marketplace. I'm an obedient person, so I would like to follow up on Mirjam van Dalen's recommendation yesterday to be clear about any abbreviations that are being used. So we use here the characters SSH to refer to the very big disciplinary domain of the social sciences and humanities. It's actually a multidisciplinary domain. It's also very big because the estimation is that in Europe alone there's 500,000 of professional researchers from the working in the various brands of social sciences and humanities. Just to avoid any confusion in the context of ESFRI, the common abbreviation is SCI for social and cultural innovation. Of course, this is a perspective that the SSH also takes, but it's a bit of a pity that ESFRI has decided to pick an abbreviation that is different from what is used in the rest of the world. So this is also a request to reconsider that choice. The topic of this session is how can thematic services add value to research infrastructure communities? So in this case, it's about the thematic services of the SSH Open Cloud community, because SHOC stands for SSH Open Cloud. And I'll try to explain this based on the SSH Open Marketplace, which is a thematic service discovery platform rooted in disciplinary communities, compatible with existing scholarly commons and aligned with international standards, such as for the Identity Federation that was discussed in the previous talk. So how do we see the role of thematic marketplaces in the ecosystem of EOSC? I think it cannot be underlined enough, but yesterday it got a lot of attention. We see thematic marketplaces to play a role in stimulating user engagement, because we think that it's important that there is community-driven service provision. And for example, this is important for being able to give guidance for the generation of metadata. These two topics were addressed by two of the speakers yesterday. Thematic marketplaces provide opportunity for the contextualization of data, workflows, and scenarios, which is very important to be able to provide recommendation services as part of the discovery of workflows. And but it's also very useful to do that to provide a comfort zone for individual researchers. So in a thematic marketplace, they should be able to relate to the culture of their peers and the disciplinary traditions they are used to. So we do think that thematic clusters and thematic marketplaces are a good starting point for cross-domain and cluster activities, but also cross-cluster activities. So for example, many parties active in SHOC also collaborate, for example, with the life sciences, not just the life science research infrastructures, but projects as well. We also know, and that yesterday that was confirmed, that that the EOSC platform is not much appreciated yet, even though that is also a marketplace. So it is important to help people to find whatever they recognize and understand and have a history with. So we think that working on marketplaces with a thematic flavor provides the best possible starting point for building the groundwork for the thing that is called EOSC, but without losing the link with the context of use. So as I said, SHOC is a cluster project, and we feel that it is contributing to the maturing of EOSC, but also to the visibility of thematic services. So it's also supporting the research infrastructures involved. Interoperability of services is very important, but of course also links with all kinds of communities of use. The kind of data types in this cluster play an important role, as is the case in all cluster projects, I would expect. So we focus on over 100 centers providing access to trusted, certified, fair data sets. And in this domain, you should think of cultural heritage content, language resources, social survey data, and they all come with their various subcategories. So for language resources, which is the domain I know best because I'm leading Claire and Eric, which is the research infrastructure for language resources. So we provide access to, for example, newspapers, literary text, political pamphlets, and a lot more. So starting from thematic services is, and then start generalizing wherever that is possible, we see as a very good strategy for, in the end, building EOSC. It's maybe also good to mention here that in the shock context and also in the video RIs, a lot of COVID-related projects have been initiated. You can find them on in the link that provide here, but just a few examples. So in Clarin, we started to collect parliamentary corpora on COVID debates to make sure that these resources can be studied in a harmonized way. Language-specific corpora have been built, social media corpora have been built, visualization of the virus in public culture, modules for specifically for topics in social surveys related to COVID have been produced. So, and these are now the stepping stones towards collaboration with, for example, the life science cluster. So we see thematic marketplaces as supporting the cloud of clouds concept. You could also see that as, again, a system of systems, but indeed also a marketplace of marketplaces. So here you see the various clouds in one cloud, but many sub-clouds with here the names of the research infrastructures involved in the shock cluster, both humanities and social sciences. And here again, the link is, the boundaries between the two are not strict. So we are active in this corner of the architecture image that was presented before. And we do see that we live up to what was written down in the Fair Lady report that was the outcome of the EOSC Sustainability Working Group, where the important role of thematic clusters and research data infrastructures and the federation model was underlined a lot. At an earlier stage of the shock project, the SSH Open Marketplace was visualized in this probably slightly boring way, but it was meant as an inventory of the various functionalities and ingredients that were needed. Here, the community aspects, here, the perspective of individual researchers, and of course, the machinery. Just recently, the marketplace was announced formally or publicly for wider audiences. It's up and running. This is how the interface looks like. You also see here the timeline towards the end of the project in April. Again, here the interface that shows that there is a facet browser. You can search for all kinds of categories of data and services. You can browse. You can find tools and services and training materials, all kinds of data sets. And just to make the link with what I told you about previously, you find here the data sets collected and curated in a harmonized way under the name of Parliament. So in general, you could say that this thematic marketplace is providing a rich source of all kinds of information, but also brings support for example, workflow selection. And in the promotional video, one use case is highlighted, namely that of a researcher that wants to study the letters sent by the scientist von Humboldt. It's a literary historian. So here you see the various very different stages in that research project that for which support is needed and for which you can find resources and services in this thematic marketplace. I hope this gave an impression of why we think this is an important marketplace, how it contributes to both EOSC and the individual research infrastructures. Here are a few links and my thanks to the people that contributed to the slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franziska. And now we have the final talk, Quality of Metadata, the FAIR's FAIR Fuji tool by Robert Huber, University of Bremen, and FAIR's FAIR project. So please, Robert.
Thank you, Per. And thank you also for the opportunity to present the Fuji tool here. The tool was developed by Anusulya Devarayu and myself. Anu now works in Australia at Turn. And so just some introducing words on the acronym. Franziska told about the importance of explaining this. F, of course, stands for FAIR, and Uchi is Malay and means tests or assessment. Therefore, F minus Uchi means a FAIR test tool. The minus mostly was used because we need to distinguish this from the Fuji film company, so to avoid conflicts with them. So the work that I present today was carried out in the context of the FAIR's FAIR task 4.5. The goal of this task was to pilot the FAIR assessment of research data from trustworthy data archives. And here we are focusing on research data, which is collected and observed for scientific purposes, including, of course, research data from research infrastructures. To achieve this, we implemented two important components. First, we implemented assessment metrics, and second, we implemented practical tools to perform FAIR assessments based on these metrics. Both components are addressing these the priority recommendation of the Turning FAIR into Reality report. To do this, we followed a use case approach. Therefore, we identified 8 different scenarios for FAIR assessment, which we structured along the research data lifecycle shown here. From these, we choose 2 scenarios. The first one is about the FAIR assessment before people actually deposit data in a trustworthy data archive. For this, we implemented FAIR Aware. And the second scenario was, of course, the deposition of research data in a trustworthy data archive once the data set has been collected. And this is so the tool which is addressing this use case is Fuji, which I'm going to introduce you. So, but important to understand the tool or these metrics we specified. These were defined based on prior work performed during the FAIR DAT and FAIR Enough projects, and these metrics are aligned with the RDA data maturity model as well as the World Data System RDA data fitness for use checklist. And the result is all these 17 metrics which have been defined for the FAIR project or for the assessment tools, which have been defined in an iterative process, which was including a number of stakeholders such as data publishers, international initiatives like OGC, RDA, WDS, and of course the EOSC FAIR working group. Based on these metrics, we have defined several practical tests which we needed to actually implement an automated assessment tool. So here the approach is hierarchical, which means for each FAIR principle, you can have one or more metrics. And for each metric, you can, we defined one or more practical tests. So here is an example for the identifier tests. Practical test is, for example, if the identifier is based on a persistent identification schema or syntax, And the second test is, for example, if the identifier can be resolved. And this is, of course, testing if the identifier actually really exists. So more details are in this deliverable, which is listed here on the bottom. The tool, well, it's called Fuji. I mentioned that. It is open source tool and available on GitHub here. The slides are all also here in the program published by the organizer of this meeting. And you can also visit the Fuji webpage at f-fuji.net to get some more information and a lot of documents related to the tool. So Fuji actually is a web service. It has a REST API, which is based on the Open API specification and was implemented in Python using Swagger and Flask. And this example shows how an output of the tool actually looks like. The response is given in JSON format and just gives you information on how the result was, including the score. The JSON also includes very verbose information on the process which has been taken place in the background. So it gives you information, for example, what kind of metadata has been discovered by Fuji and by what means this API was designed for machine interaction. So this is the top level flow or workflow of the Fuji assessment. Fuji takes an PID or GUI as an input information, and from this it is trying to identify or get to the landing page and extract metadata from this. It is also using additional means to extract metadata and is using, for example, service endpoints to identify additional metadata standards which are supported by the provider. And it is Fuji is also using third-party information such as this from ESFRI data to identify, again, supported standards, metadata formats, and so on. So Fuji is then collecting metadata by these different means, collates this metadata and performs the individual testing and assessment based on the metrics defined. So this is just a quick overview on the main ways Fuji is using to collect metadata. Basically, Fuji is extracting metadata from the landing page. It is using typed links to follow. From there, Fuji is trying to identify additional metadata, which can be given in XML or other formats. And Fuji is using content negotiation to also to retrieve additional formats like XML or EF or JSON. Fuji mainly supports domain agnostic standards like Dublin Core, Schema, and so on. Also very common formats to express metadata like microdata. Open Graph RDFA supports feeds and RDF, RDFA to parse structured data. And recently we also implemented and environmental data. So this is to be continued in the future to be able to support more domain-specific habits to expose metadata, fair metadata. So in addition to the web service, we also implemented a demo implementation, a demo web client, which is available at f-uji.net. So the web client gives you the opportunity in a user-friendly way to perform your assessment on individual data sets on your own. You will get back a result which gives you a short overview on the score which has been reached, an estimate on the maturity of the individual FAIR principles, and well, you can here, of course, save this assessment and share this with other interested, and it just gives a nice human-friendly output of what I showed before, what is usually given in JSON. So regarding the pilot assessments, we have tested data from 5 trustworthy data archives, which are interdisciplinary, which you can see here, also from various domains. All of these are co-trustees certified or ES certified, and from each of these repositories, we evaluated about 500 data sets. For example, here, Pangaea, this is where I work in the moment. So we tested 500 data sets, and for each of these assessments, we provided a detailed report, which included results for each metric and test, and we provided comments and possible ways how to improve the fairness of a data set, and proposed next steps to be performed. And this was then the starting point for for the repository providers to actually implement this recommendation. So then we ran the second test, and this led in all cases to significant improvement of the fairness of each contributing data archive. This is an example for Pangaea, where you can see on the first row, you see the result of the first test run, where we had really bad result in accessibility, and after the implementing the recommendations to improve fairness, we significantly could improve the score for accessibility, and this was similarly done for the other data archives, which I can't show here for confidentiality reasons. But so for all contributing data archives, we were able to improve fairness. And so the lessons we learned was that, first, of course, automatized fairness assessment is possible, and we are able to support a very large and diverse community. All, in most cases, are supporting domain agnostic standards anyway. And the ideal way to do is to use the Fuji tool in a combination with a in-depth face-to-face fair consulting process and iterative process, which in the pilot phase enabled us also to improve the Fuji tool itself, not only the fairness of the contributing repositories. So this is basically the main message of the FAIRSFAIR project, that the combination of consultancy and fair assessment is best practice. So this is a list of people who contributed to the tool and to the task, and I just wanted to show you a slideshow, a picture of the FAIRWare tool, which is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert, and very nice presentation, how things can be automated, difficult things. Okay, we now, I think we have all the panel here, and let's move into a question answer session here. We have had a lot of questions. Thank you to the audience here for all the questions in the Q&A, and a large number of them have been answered already in writing. But to pick something that I saw there and was also upvoted, it came from Dale Robertson, and there were some more, and Gary Pollock, yeah, about the sustainability of, it came up concerning the questions that Jonathan raised with the AI infrastructure. And but I think it applies to many of the services that are coming here. How do we? Yes, we have a project. We can build a tool, and then how to sustain it. If you look on EOSC, in EOSpeak, it is a co-programmed collaboration with a really tripart collaboration in that sense. It is the member states, the European Commission, and the EOSC Association with its members. So looking on that collaboration, it looks like it should be enough muscles to sustain a lot of activities. And maybe to ask the different panelists here, the different organizations and collaborations you represent, do you see a future here that this is something that can be picked, how things can be picked up by the EOSC Association, and what, so to say, how do we organize this to make it happen, that the essential things actually can be sustained, and in what way? Any ideas about this? May I start with you, Franziska?
Yeah, thank you, Per. We should be careful with, if we talk about sustainability, to clearly identify which angle of sustainability we take. I think you mentioned funding. This was also mentioned yesterday already, and I think it is an important angle. So I would like to maybe start with a with a comment that is maybe not very popular among many of my colleagues, but I think that in principle, ESFRI and other research infrastructures that have reached the stage of a legal entity should have a horizon for funding their activities that is longer than what a project would require. And if you don't invest, I'm not talking about project activities now, but if you don't invest your budget in things that are a priori vulnerable and with a limited time horizon, but focus on the things that can be sustained, then you are in the position to continue a contribution, or at least sustain your own contribution to the thematic clusters or the wider EOSC. But of course, this comes with a condition, namely that the highest authorities in those organizations, in those legal entities, such as the General Assembly often, that they allow you to do that, and that they don't limit you to generating one type of data only, because then you can never continue the activities that are innovative and that can help building this European flagship. So I think one thing that should be considered, and there are many more angles, I am aware of that, but is that the mission that those legal entities or the research infrastructures that are legal entities adopt do allow investments in these activities.
So I conclude the strategies of the research infrastructures themselves are very important in this, yes.
And of course, for the collaboration, you may need some additional funds, because this was about sustaining your own services. So working on the collaboration, yeah, therefore some additional funds would be very welcome.
Okay, someone want to comment on this? Klaas?
Not so much to comment, because I very much agree with most what Franziska said, but maybe to open one of those other angles, I think this is fundamentally pretty difficult, because a lot of what we're doing is what I would call plumbing, and plumbing is very hard to get sustainable funding for, in terms of let the users pay for it. So I think with a few exceptions, if I look, for instance, at the GÉANT angle, then we don't have problem getting our members to pay for connectivity by now, but we're talking 20 years down the line, we don't have problems getting our members to pay for EduRoam and EduGain. But everything else takes a long time before it's accepted as I would say, a utility-like service that you would pay for. So I think that is why we keep relying on funding mostly from the EC or from national governments, and it's really hard to make plumbing sustainable? Who cares about the electricity wire beyond your house? I care very much about electricity in my house, but I just expect it to arrive at my house. And so I think we just have to be very thankful to national governments and the EC for seeing the value of this and for keeping investing in it. But I want to end with recognizing what Francisca said, that I think is very important, and that is we need to be able to look beyond that 2.5 or 4 year cycle of project funding and get more sustainable long-term funding for some of these things that are very important.
Thank you. Shall we move on? And I think this is the sustainability here and the role for the, I think the EOSC Association, and we as members also have to play a large role to try to coordinate and find ways for this together with the different RIs and that are usually also members of the association. Move on to a bit more specific questions here from Yuri Demoshenko. So he's asking, it's really for the EOSC Future, EOSC Association, EOSC Future project about the portal, if it also will provide, or is the focus only on the portal here, or will it provide a platform for these kind of more thematic or for thematic marketplaces or discovery tools for services? And that also linked to another question here from Philippe Seger on how to find these thematic services. And then I could add, do you see any need here also for this cross-fertilization? You could say that, well, someone from physics, there is an interesting tool here from social sciences, or maybe closer from life sciences and social sciences that could be combined, and how can we promote these kind of things? But first, maybe on EOSC Future here on the portal, and is there some ideas on a more generalized platform for also thematic portals or marketplaces? Maybe Klaas could say something on this.
Have I not talked enough yet? But
yeah,
no. So that is definitely a plan. But as in the discussion in the Q&A we had already. Our first goal is to integrate existing portals and making it possible from your existing environment to gain access to other environments. And only the next step is us also creating a portal. We will make a portal. It will be usable. It will hopefully be good. But as I also said in the Q&A, I lack the arrogance to think that we will in a few months' time do better than what communities have spent many years on creating. So this will happen over time.
I bounced this question to Isabel also, because you have more or less also a specialization here in making open source software and bring the developments that are doing to, for the community to use. And how can one support that further?
I mean, then I will bring the issue of technical sustainability in everything we do. Right. For example, the question of Yuri about a platform as service that is generic enough. To me, that seems unlikely, and I'm not sure how useful it is, because the pass level, in my view, will always depend on the end user community. What will be important, because you need to program against the APIs that are available on that platform. And that is extremely community dependent, that is problem dependent. So where EOSC could help is in providing a coherent view of what is available as APIs. For example, I was mentioning in my presentation that we can plug in FAIR evaluators there that use open interfaces, like the one that Robert was describing. It uses an open API, an open REST API, etc. So then you can play with that. So the promotion of these open interfaces and a sort of clarification of the landscape of what is available, that is some sort of information layer that we could provide at the level of the marketplace. Specific to applications, etc. But the platform, I mean, we made many platforms, as you know, Per, in our career.
Yeah.
You know,
they come and go.
They come and go.
That's true, yes. Okay, we are approaching the end of this session, and before I really thank you for your presentations, and I thank all the panelists for this discussion. We have a lot of questions, and I think many of them have been answered in the chat or in the Q&A there in written form, and the discussion will continue for sure. So thank you very much. And with this, I give the word to Miriam to conclude and give us the instructions for the rest of the day.
Okay, thank you very much, Per. Thank you to all the speakers. This was a very lively session, which was partly in the Q&A, was very visible, and also in the discussion just now. Thank you very much. We are now coming to a break that we will continue at 12 o'clock, and then we will go on with session 6. And this works like yesterday with the Slido that will be explained then by Fotis before the session starts. And until then, I wish you a nice coffee break and see you back here at 12 o'clock.